When thinking about martial arts manga, no one can deny the importance of Baki for the genre. Next year will be the series' 30th anniversary, boasting a whopping 137 volumes to date and 75 million copies sold with its first 4 iterations. While the series is clearly popular, it's sadly never broken into the mainstream over here as it has in its homeland, with later parts largely going unnoticed in weekly discussion threads. The 2014 part, known as Baki Dou, following a cloned Musashi Miyamoto fighting the cast, may even be the black sheep of the series, with criticisms I've seen being directed towards its slow pacing at times, lackluster ending, and the death of fan favourite Kyoretsu, being the biggest death in Baki's near 30-year run. Some people may have just had enough of the series after the third part, known as Baki Son of Ogre, which finally gave us the confrontation between father and son we've been waiting so long for, and the fact that the last 20 or so chapters haven't been properly translated doesn't do part 4 any favours. Most criticism of this part I can accept. If you think this series has overstayed its welcome after part 3, then I can understand that since the main conflict has been resolved, and part 4 does feel a lot slower with less fights. What this part does have going for it, however, is Musashi being an absolutely excellent character and having a great battle with Motobe. I keep hearing people say that Motobe and Musashi are way too OP in this part and mess with the power levels of the series. I think this is bullshit, and even if it was true, what they bring to the part is worth far more than what they take away from it. They complement each other perfectly and elevate the series to new heights for me, so let's talk about these two in the way of the warrior, shall we? Throughout Baki's history, we've always had conflicting worldviews and philosophies as different martial arts converge in the underground arena. No one is more disconnected from the cast than Musashi, however, due to the vastly different period he lived in. Being a samurai, duels could only really end in one way, and that's with the death of yourself or your opponent. Even if you somehow managed to survive the duel, when faced with failure many samurai would commit seppuku, with death being seen as a way to restore honour when losing a duel or when violating Bushido. Musashi came from a period where your skills with a sword gave you renown, and you could end up with a comfortable living for yourself by cutting your opponents down until you're noticed by a lord and become their vassal, in return getting your own land. Whenever he's looking at his opponents, he's normally seeing something like a mountain of gold, a great banquet, all symbolism for how he views his opponent as being a stepping stone to greater notoriety. Intoxicated by his previous success and his position on top of the world, he'll continue cutting to reach the same heights in modern day as he knows nothing else, and it's a scary prospect. One of the most chilling parts of Baki for me is when we see Musashi fighting the police. Instances of the fighters interacting with the public are usually used to demonstrate the sheer gap they have with the rest of humanity, or to give us some comedic effect as we see things from the average person's perspective, but what we have here is an absolute slaughter. Previously, Musashi had simply knocked out cops that were trying to take him down to the station, but now a full-on conflict has broken out between the two. He's ready and willing to kill every single officer that will attack with lethal force. After slicing an officer in two, he mentions how it was a good match, and as he angers the rest of the force, he revels in this situation. This is a man who only knows how to kill with dreams of grandeur, and this part of the manga perfectly highlights how there's no way for him to live in modern day. He's destined to live a life of solitude with a mindset no one else can understand, giving a pretty tragic, sympathetic side to him. In this regard, I thought it was a nice touch to have a minor bonding moment between him and Pickle, with the two being displaced in the modern era and both sharing beastly traits. Considering how isolated Musashi is, it was pretty impactful to have him go out of his way to meet someone, and finally have some semblance of companionship. So with all we know about Musashi, we have a bit of a problem. He only knows how to cut people down, giving them a beautiful end, and there's a lot of people in Tokyo that are itching at the chance to fight one of the strongest men to ever exist. Whether due to his own hubris or a near-even matchup, there are plenty of instances where Musashi almost loses throughout the part, but the reality is that unless you win, chances are that he'll strike you down, having the potential and most importantly the instinct to kill virtually the entire cast. Retsu's death was heartbreaking, though sadly inevitable due to the fact that there's no way he'd ever back down from the fight, just like how Baki, Doppio and Shibukawa, to name a few, gladly put their life on the line in combat, regardless of their chances of success. When Retsu's lying in the arena, guts hanging out, it's a chilling reminder to the fighters looking on that this could be them in not too long. Leading up to the fight there were plenty of death flags, and you could see Tokugawa having second thoughts, envisioning the arena covered in blood as he realised the kind of fight he was sanctioning. The reality is that Musashi doesn't fight in tournaments or anything like that. He fought in wars, and every battle was a fight to the death, with threats coming from every angle. If he's fighting, he's trying to kill you, simple as that, and if you're strong enough he'll cut you down to reach further notoriety. He doesn't care about the rules of the arena, referees, and this poses a problem for the modern day fighting methods that Baki and company partake in. People who have been through wars treat battles differently, and Musashi's experience in war or life and death combat trumps anyone else's. If the cast don't appreciate this difference, it could come back to bite them hard. As a side note, I thought for this reason that it was some good development to have Baki vow to erase Musashi near the end of the part, gaining a similar no-holds-barred mindset to the samurai he's up against. It was clear that this was the only way to take him down, and this determination from Baki helped up the stakes. This understanding of Musashi's way of living, the determination to pull out all the stops to achieve victory, is why Motobe needed to come forward. Motobe beat Baki and Jack Hanma in this part, which was a shock to many. He was armed to the brim and had time to set up traps in these fights, so you could easily say they weren't fair. That's true, and Motobe would agree with you, stating multiple times throughout that he's weaker than the two of them. That doesn't matter however, as regardless of the means, he won the fights and could have killed both of them, and that's the sad reality of it. Whether it's fair or not, if Motobe killed Baki after the smoke bomb attack, there'd hardly be anyone to complain about his victory. He's not a better fighter than either of these two and probably a decent chunk of the cast, but that doesn't mean he can't beat them or potentially kill them in a fight as long as he uses his head. Motobe's always studied the art of war and in a way is almost as displaced as Musashi, being one of the few people to use and appreciate so many weapons. He's dedicated himself to mastering long forgotten methods of attack and ancient weapons, and has developed a style more akin to what Musashi's used to and is well versed in himself, understanding his strengths more than anyone else. Motobe is aware of how he fights and most importantly has no pride to get in the way of taking this man down. Poison, sneak attacks, explosives, all these things that some would consider shameless, Motobe will use without a second thought, being a man aware of his limits and the uphill struggle he faces going against all these monsters. He's not arrogant, far from it, and he knows for him that it would take nothing else in his entire arsenal to take out the likes of Musashi and Jack Hanma. It's a true underdog story, which is reason enough to root for him in this fight, but I also had a lot of love for his motivations. In later parts, Motobe doesn't seem to have the same drive for strength as everyone else, but that's because instead of being a fighter, he's a warrior, cultivating all forms of martial arts, especially those forgotten in modern days such as using shurikens, spears, etc. He's always studied the art of war, and as a result I thought it is very much like him to believe in the cultivation of modern martial arts as well. The fact that despite being so entrenched in the old school method of fighting, he goes out of his way to keep his opponents alive shows just how much he respects all forms of combat, and he knows that as the person who understands Musashi the most, he has to take him down to stop all the cast's fabulous fighters from being killed, with their secrets being lost to history. As he says, the only way to beat the old generation is to become it, and never before have I seen two fighters be so similar, yet have such diametrically opposing viewpoints. For a series that doesn't take itself seriously a lot of the time, the writing in Baki Dou really exceeds itself, with this being a fantastic example. No one believed in Motobe throughout this part, not the readers and not the cast, with Retsu and Baki looking down on him. So as the real threat of Musashi becomes clear to us, it was a very cathartic moment for me to have the arena crowd clap as Motobe enters, slowly becoming aware of the difference between them and the samurai and why Motobe might be needed. Everyone was angered and insulted when Motobe said he'd protect them, but in the end they're well and truly humbled and all they can do is apologise. It's a very strong character arc, perhaps the best in Baki's history, with Motobe going from some kinda badass old man to a character with genuine personality that could end up being one of your favourites. As I said in the beginning, for everything you may think was wrong with Motobe in this part, what we gained through his development was worth far more. Overall, Motobe and Musashi are without a doubt the strongest written characters in the part. Motobe grows excellently as a character and is one of my favourites in the series now, and Musashi kept me captivated throughout. It's hard to ever get a read in the character, one moment being a psychopath and another being surprisingly kind. He's an enigma, which I thought was very fitting for such a legendary character, as it's truly like his thoughts operate on another plane from the rest of us. The author did such an excellent job with these two, and for this reason I think Baki Dou is one of the best parts of the series.